The day I discovered my parents' true plan, I realized they never loved me, they loved what I could give them. And when they found out my husband was worth 8 figures, suddenly their unworthy son-in-law became the most important person in their world. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened 3 years ago changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and the people who are supposed to protect you no matter what. My name is Sarah, and I grew up in what everyone called the perfect middle-class family in suburban Chicago. My father worked as a mid-level manager at an insurance company. My mother was a part-time real estate agent. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a white picket fence, literally. Everything looked picture-perfect from the outside. But perfection has a price, and that price was control. My parents had mapped out my entire life before I could even walk. I would go to Northwestern University, major in business or law, marry someone from a good family with established wealth, and give them grandchildren they could brag about at their country club. Every decision I made had to fit into their master plan. When I was 25, I met David at a coffee shop downtown. He was sitting alone, sketching in a worn notebook, completely absorbed in his work. There was something about the way he moved his pencil across the paper, like he was conducting a symphony only he could hear. "What are you drawing?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, and I swear time stopped. His eyes were this incredible shade of green, like sea glass, and when he smiled, my heart did this stupid little flip. "Just an idea," he said, closing the notebook. "I'm working on a new app concept." An app. My parents would have rolled their eyes. David wore second-hand clothes, drove a beat-up Honda Civic, and lived in a tiny studio apartment above a pizza place. He was everything they taught me to avoid. But when he talked about his dreams, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. He wanted to create something that would help people, something that mattered. He worked 16-hour days coding, surviving on ramen noodles and pure determination. I fell in love with his passion before I fell in love with him. We dated for 2 years before I worked up the courage to bring him home. I should have known it would be a disaster. The moment David walked through our front door, I saw my father's face change. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a forced smile that didn't reach his mouth. My mother was worse. She looked David up and down like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "So, David," my father said during dinner, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a software developer," David replied. "I'm actually working on launching my own company soon." My parents exchanged a look. One of those silent conversations married couples have, full of raised eyebrows and subtle head shakes. "How ambitious," my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. "And what does this company do, exactly?" David started explaining his app, his voice growing more animated as he talked about the potential impact. My parents nodded politely, but I could see them mentally calculating his net worth and finding it lacking. After David left, they didn't even wait for his car to pull out of the driveway. "Sarah, honey," my mother said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Don't you think you're settling?" "Settling?" I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "He seems nice," my father said, the word nice sounding like an insult. "But is he really husband material? Can he provide for you? Give you the life you deserve?" "I can provide for myself," I shot back. "That's not the point," my mother said, sitting beside me on the couch. "You're 27, Sarah. You need to think about your future. About children. About security." They spent the next hour listing every reason why David wasn't right for me. He didn't have a stable income. He wasn't from the right background. He didn't share our values. He was a dreamer, not a provider. I listened to them tear apart the man I loved, and something inside me broke. "I'm going to marry him," I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. "Over my dead body," my father said, his voice ice cold. "If you marry that boy," my mother added, "don't expect us to be there." Don't expect our support. Don't expect anything from us. I stared at these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and I realized I didn't know them at all. Fine, I said, standing up. Then don't expect me. I walked out of that house and never looked back. David and I got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with his family and our closest friends. My parents didn't show up. They didn't call. They didn't even send a card. It hurt more than I expected. Even though I knew they were wrong, even though I was angry, part of me kept hoping they'd come around. That they'd realize their daughter's happiness mattered more than their social expectations. But they never did. The first year of marriage was hard. Not because of David, he was everything I'd dreamed of and more. But cutting off contact with my parents left this gaping hole in my life. Every holiday, every milestone, every moment when I wanted to share good news, I felt their absence like a physical ache. David's app launched 8 months after our wedding. At first, it gained traction slowly. A few hundred downloads, then a few thousand. But David had created something special, a platform that connected small businesses with local communities in ways that had never been done before. By our 2nd anniversary, the app had over 1 million users. By our 3rd anniversary, David had sold the company to a major tech corporation for more money than I'd ever imagined possible. The number had so many zeros I had to count them twice. We went from living paycheck to being, well, let's just say money was no longer a concern. We bought a house in an exclusive neighborhood, not because we needed the status, but because we finally could. David started an investment fund focused on supporting other young entrepreneurs. I opened a nonprofit helping women start their own businesses. We kept our success relatively quiet. We didn't flaunt our wealth or seek attention. Most of our old friends didn't even know how much our lives had changed. But somehow, my parents found out. The first sign was a friend request from my mother on social media. I'd blocked both my parents years earlier, but she'd created a new account under her maiden name. I almost deleted it immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. Her profile was full of photos I didn't recognize. Pictures of her volunteering at charity events, attending fundraisers, posing with local politicians. It was like she'd reinvented herself as some kind of socialite. Then I saw the message. Sarah, honey, I know it's been a long time, but I've been thinking about you every day. Your father and I made mistakes, and we want to make things right. Could we meet for coffee? I miss my daughter so much. I stared at that message for hours. Part of me wanted to believe it was genuine. That they'd finally realized what they'd lost. That 3 years of silence had made them understand that their daughter's happiness mattered more than their prejudices. But something felt off. The timing was too convenient. Too coincidental. I showed the message to David. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they really do miss me. David took my hand. Sarah, I'll support whatever you decide. But be careful. People like your parents, they don't usually change unless they want something. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the feeling away. These were my parents. They'd raised me. Fed me. Clothed me. Surely they deserved a chance to explain. I agreed to meet my mother at a coffee shop downtown. The same one where I'd met David, actually. I thought there was something poetic about that. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Designer handbag, expensive jewelry, perfect hair and makeup. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Sarah. She rushed over and wrapped me in a hug that felt forced and theatrical. Oh, honey, you look wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. We sat down, and she ordered the most expensive drink on the menu. Everything about her screamed money, new money, the kind that comes with insecurity and a desperate need to prove itself. I can't believe how long it's been, she said, her voice trembling with what I assumed was emotion. I've missed you so much. We both have. Where's Dad? I asked. He wanted to come, but he was nervous. You know how he is. He's not good with emotional conversations. The same excuse she'd been making for him my entire life. So what's changed? I asked directly. 3 years ago, you told me not to expect anything from you if I married David. Now you want to reconnect. Why? Her face flickered, just for a second. A micro-expression that reminded me of the mother I'd grown up with. Calculating. Manipulative. We were wrong, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. So terribly wrong. We let our fears and prejudices cloud our judgment. We should have supported you. We should have trusted your choice. And David? David seems like a wonderful man. I'd love to get to know him better. To apologize for how we treated him. The words sounded rehearsed. Like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. How did you know to contact me now? I asked. Another flicker. What do you mean? I mean, you could have reached out any time in the past 3 years. Why now? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I've been wanting to reach out for months. I finally worked up the courage. Lie. I could feel it in my bones. Mom, how did you find out about David's company? The question hit her like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the woman who'd tried to control every aspect of my life. What do you mean? His company. The sale. The money. How did you find out? She fidgeted with her purse strap. I don't know what you're talking about. You're wearing a $5,000 handbag, Mom. 3 years ago, you shopped at department store sales. Your jewelry alone is worth more than Dad's annual salary. So I'll ask again, how did you find out? The mask slipped completely. Sarah, I don't think that's relevant to. Who told you? She sighed, the pretense finally cracking. Margaret Henderson. You remember her from the country club? Her daughter works at a financial planning firm. She saw David's name in some business magazine article about young tech entrepreneurs. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. They hadn't reached out because they missed me. They hadn't reached out because they'd realized their mistake. They'd reached out because they'd discovered I was rich. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice eerily calm. For 3 years, while I was building a new life, starting a marriage, dealing with the grief of losing my family, you were living your lives, perfectly content without me. Until you found out my husband was successful. Then suddenly, you remembered you had a daughter. It's not that simple. Isn't it? I leaned back in my chair. Tell me, Mom, what's the real reason you want to reconnect? And don't lie to me. I've had 3 years to learn how to spot lies. She looked around the coffee shop nervously, as if checking to see who might be listening. Your father's company is in trouble, she said quietly. They're downsizing. He might lose his job. There it was. The truth, finally. And you thought what? That I'd swoop in and save you? That David would write you a check? We hoped, that family means something to you. The audacity of it took my breath away. Family? I repeated. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't abandon their daughter on her wedding day. Family doesn't cut off contact for 3 years because they don't approve of who she loves. Family doesn't show up with their hand out the moment they discover she's successful. Tears started streaming down her face, but they looked calculated. Strategic. Sarah, please. We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We still love you. No, I said, standing up. Parents love their children unconditionally. What you feel for me is conditional. It's based on what I can do for you, what I can provide, how I can make you look good to your friends. That's not true. Then prove it. Walk away. Don't ask for anything. Don't expect anything. Just apologize and leave me alone. She couldn't do it. The words stuck in her throat, because we both knew that's not why she was there. I thought so, I said, gathering my purse. Tell Dad I said hello. And tell him his unworthy son-in-law sends his regards. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. The little girl inside me who'd been hoping for her parents' approval had finally died, and in her place was a woman who knew her worth. But the story doesn't end there. Because my parents weren't done trying to manipulate me. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my father. He was crying, actual tears, not the fake ones my mother had tried. He sounded broken, desperate. Sarah, please. I know we hurt you. I know we were wrong. But I'm begging you. I'm going to lose everything. The house, the retirement savings, everything. Can't you find it in your heart to help your old man? For a moment, I almost wavered. This was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd scared away monsters from under my bed, who'd walked me to school on my first day of kindergarten. Then I remembered the man who'd called my husband unworthy. Who'd told me not to expect anything from them if I chose love over their approval. Dad, I said quietly, do you remember what you told me 3 years ago? Sarah, You told me that if I married David, not to expect anything from you. Not your support, not your presence, nothing. Do you remember that? Silence. Well, Dad, I'm returning the favor. Don't expect anything from me. I hung up and blocked his number. The next few months were a masterclass in manipulation. They tried everything. Guilt trips through extended family members. Sob stories about medical bills and foreclosure. They even showed up at my house one evening, standing on my doorstep with tears in their eyes. I watched them through the security camera, these people who'd given me life but had never really known me. David stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder. Do you want to talk to them? He asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh. If I should give them another chance. Then I remembered the look on my mother's face when she'd first met David. The way she'd dismissed his dreams. The way they'd both written him off as unworthy before they'd even gotten to know him. No, I said. I don't. They stood there for 20 minutes, knocking and calling my name. I never answered the door. That was 8 months ago. I heard through the grapevine that my father did lose his job. They had to sell the house, move into a small apartment. My mother's social media posts became less frequent, less glamorous. I felt sad for them, but I didn't feel guilty. There's a difference. You see, I learned something important during those 3 years of silence. I learned that love isn't about obligation or blood relations or shared DNA. Love is about choice. It's about showing up for someone even when it's hard. It's about supporting their dreams even when you don't understand them. It's about choosing them over and over again, especially when the world tells you not to. David chose me when I came with baggage and family drama. He chose me when I was crying over parents who'd rejected us both. He chose me when I was broke and uncertain about the future. My parents? They never chose me. They chose their image of who they wanted me to be. They chose their social status over their daughter's happiness. They chose money over love, appearances over authenticity. And when they finally reached out, it wasn't because they'd learned to choose me. It was because they'd learned I was worth choosing from a financial perspective. That's not love. That's opportunism. Today, David and I are happier than I ever imagined possible. We travel the world, support causes we believe in, and build a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection. We're talking about starting a family, and when we do, our children will never question whether they're loved for who they are or what they can provide. They'll never have to choose between their parents' approval and their own happiness, because they'll always have both. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting off contact with my parents. If I think I was too harsh. If I miss having them in my life. The truth is, I don't miss them. I miss the idea of them. I miss having parents who loved me unconditionally. But I never actually had that to begin with. What I have now is better. I have a husband who saw my worth when I was nobody special. I have friends who celebrate my successes without expecting anything in return. I have a life built on authenticity instead of performance. And most importantly, I have self-respect. I know my value doesn't come from what I can give other people. It comes from who I am, how I treat others, and the choices I make every single day. My parents taught me one final lesson, though they didn't mean to. They taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only love you conditionally. Even if those people are your parents. The saddest part isn't that they lost me. It's that they never really had me to begin with. They had their idea of who I should be, their projection of their own unfulfilled dreams, their tool for social advancement. But they never had me. The real me. The woman who falls in love with dreamers, who values integrity over income, who believes in building something meaningful rather than just accumulating wealth. That woman was invisible to them until she became financially valuable. And by then, it was too late. I don't hate my parents. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend on people who actually deserve it. But I don't owe them forgiveness either. Forgiveness is earned, not given freely to people who haven't changed, who haven't grown, who still see relationships as transactions. Maybe someday they'll understand what they lost. Maybe they'll realize that having a daughter who's happy and fulfilled is worth more than having a daughter who's rich and miserable. But probably not. People like my parents rarely learn those kinds of lessons. They're too busy calculating the cost of everything to recognize the value of anything. As for me, I learned to calculate differently. I learned that love multiplies when you give it freely, that respect grows when you demand it honestly, and that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. I chose David. He chose me. We chose each other. And that choice made all the difference. Some stories don't have happy endings where everyone reconciles and learns to love each other. Some stories have honest endings where people learn to love themselves enough to walk away from those who don't. This is one of those stories. And you know what? I'm perfectly okay with that. If you've ever had to choose between family approval and your own happiness, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when we're brave enough to share our truth.